Hello, in this session we're going to look into the configuration of the WebFOCUS Snowflake Adapter. So I got my Snowflake system available, I got WebFOCUS available, so let's add Snowflake to my database connection. To get started, we're going to select Get Data to configure a new adapter for Snowflake. By default, you're going to find it in the list here. If you're missing Snowflake in that list, just hit the plus and search for Snowflake to add Snowflake to that list here. If you already have it in here, double click on it and start to add a new connection. To work with Snowflake, we're gonna need a connection name. The first one's gonna be Snowflake user, because we're gonna create a connection based on a user. For the URL, you can easily get your jdbc URL sample in here. So I already prepared mine. So let's go for the connection string. So at the end, it's nothing but jdbc, Snowflake, and your instance name in here, plus snowflakecomputing.com. You can add your data warehouse. So in Snowflake, if you configured one or multiple data warehouses in the system, you can go to your administration and you can look at the warehouses. There you can see there's my WebFOCUS warehouse. So I'm going to connect to the data warehouse. In addition, I'm going to add the DB, which is going to be Snowflake in here. So if you move back in here, you're going to go to your databases. So you can select your databases in the system. So go to data, databases, and there's Snowflake. So Snowflake, the Snowflake database is something that's only available for certain people because it's the internal administration information of Snowflake. So you can see the account usage and things like that. So, okay, let's move back. So we're going to configure a connection to that one, to the Snowflake. You could also, of course, if you got a pure Snowflake instance, you could go to Snowflake sample data. So you could take that sample data. So it's going to be the Snowflake sample data. So instead of my DB Snowflake, I'm going to use Snowflake sample data in here. So whatever is going to be UDB, I set tracing to be off in here. Which one? This will belong here. So that's the string, jdbc, your account, warehouse, which is the warehouse you're going to use. DB is the database you want to go to, that you want to connect. So we can add a string here. So let's add Snowflake sample data as the connection name. I can use for, in that case, I'm going to use explicit. So I'm going to use my user in here. So we're going to go for the user, connect via a user and a password. So we're going to add our password. Not going to make any more changes in here. Besides, if you go to advanced parameters, you have to add the class path in here, which means you have to link the jar file. In addition, you could also go to the driver name. I personally like to do that one, so I'm going to add the Snowflake driver name. It's optional, but I want to add it in here. Then we need the Snowflake JDBC jar file. Don't go for the 3.8 one, so there are newer versions. So on my system, I already put it on the system. So it's actually in the folder IB. There's my JDBC folder, and there I put my Snowflake JDBC file. So select that one. So it's now added to the system. I can allow or disallow data loading in here. I can add a description for the connection, or I can simply just configure that connection. So there we go. So we can now test the connection. In an ideal world, we're going to see what we see in here. So that's just some standard table information. But having that done, I can now select show the UMS objects. In here, we can select where we're going to go from. By default, those are the tables available in Snowflake. So I'm going to go for that one. And we're going to go for region. So we're going to pick a region, we put it into our personal folder in here, select add.
information, right? The data information will be going into application property.
And there we go. It loads designer.
If you want to do like a group or messaging,
and we're going to be able to continue to work with Snowflake. It's not too much in here. You see, it's only the region name that we can put on the horizontal axis. And there's the region key. Doesn't make too much sense, but at least to show that we have access. There we go. So straightforward, we're connected. Besides that user-based authentication, there's different type of authentications that are supported by Snowflake. So if you, for example, look for Snowflake Key Pair Authentication, it's an authentication type by Snowflake that's meant to be for a more secure configuration, because it's not going to use user and password. It's going to use a private public key connection to Snowflake instead of a username. To configure that one, so we're going to move over here. So let's go back and we're going to add a second connection. So we're going to go back to get data. We already have all the things connected that we needed to be connected. So we're going to add a new connection in here. Actually, we're going to use a very similar one. So we're going to go for Snowflake Key Pair, just for example. Most of it is going to be identical to what we just configured, but with a small change in here. So we're going to now look for the key pair configuration in here. So what do we need to do a key pair authentication against the system? Actually, it's going to be a very similar configuration. We're going to use a connection name that we already have, and we need a connection string. So let's add the URL. So in here, the URL, I'm going to pass the URL into the we're going to put it into the description as well, but it's going to be very similar. It's going to be your name, a different type of writing the name. So there's two ways to position or to build your name. So it's going to be that version here, or it's going to be the version that you saw before, in my case, the one that contains the EU West.1/1. So different ways to do the same thing. So it's going to document Snowflake. So here we're going to go for WebFOCUS data warehouse. We're going to go for Snowflake sample data. We go for a certain schema. I can add the schema in here. I don't need to, so I can also get rid of the schema. So let's get rid of the schema. By the way, be aware, those URLs that I had to add in here, I have that type sign in here to separate the ampersand, because otherwise WebFOCUS is going to have issues storing information. So what's the difference now? So instead of just putting that information in here, so you see, for the private key, we need our private key file. So that private key file in here is something we're going to need to pass down to the system. So if you remember, we had our jdbc file in the system. So I put that jdbc file into my configuration. Back to the advanced parameters. So remember that one. I stored my jdbc jar file in that folder, and that's where I put my key file as well. So if we move over to here, so on my system, that key file is stored under this folder. So we have to get rid of that one and enter our specific folder. One thing to be aware of, instead of the back slashes, we're going to need the forward slashes in the URL, in that jdbc URL. So make sure to replace backslashes by forward slashes. So what else do we need? We need a private key password. That's the password used to create and to secure your private key. So that one I'm going to keep in here. So I put all the configuration parameters. So what else do we need? We need a user in here. So that user is going to be our PG and ATS. That's our user. We have to, or we can actually add a private name in here if we don't need it. So what's the difference in here now? So instead of user and password, we're only going to use user. And in the connection string, we're going to add our private key file and private password to do the authentication. So having that done, we can configure it. So we got our key pair, we can test the connection. And there we go, we're in. So it looks to be absolutely the same, and we can create the elements. So the only difference in here is we're using a password that we're going to send through the connection. In here, we're going to send a key pair. How do you verify? Pretty easy. If you go back to your Snowflake system and you're an administrator, you can go to account usage, you go to views. In there, you're going to find the elements in here, and the most important and interesting one for us is going to be sessions, because sessions is going to be a view that shows you all the relevant sessions. So you're going to use WebFOCUS as a data warehouse. We're going to preview that information. Keep in mind, it's not going to be up to date all the time. So it might have a 1 or 2 hour delay even in here. So if you want to do some testing, you might see and expect some delays in here. But one thing you see in here, I got multiple authentication methods in here. As you see in here, we've got user Pahoo666 connecting via password connection to the system using that specific jdbc package. You could also see more information about that configuration and connection. But you're also going to see there's my PG-METS user, and that one is not using password authentication. That one is using our key pair authentication. Those all-off authentication you see in here, by the way, are whatever I do in the web application in here. So in here, you can be able to see who's connecting to the system. So in here, I can see there's some Windows Server systems, which is my WebFOCUS system talking to Snowflake. You're going to find some more details in here. So by the way, if you like to do some analysis on that information in WebFOCUS to do some more debugging, of course, you can create a connection in here. So let me duplicate the connection that we have in here. So we're going to use our user and password. That user is an administrator. So instead of the sample data, we're going to use admin data. Let's add Snowflake to it. Snowflake admin data. So there we got the data. So now we're going to use Snowflake instead of Snowflake sample data. We're going to configure that one. So now we have access to admin data. So we can look at the DBMS property elements in here. So in here, you're going to see the elements. Remember that what thing we saw was a view. So we're going to go to table and views. So there's account usage. We're going to focus on sessions. So we're going to pick up the Snowflake sessions element. So let's add a prefix. So we're going to have Snowflake underscore sessions. And let's add that one. So we can connect to the sessions tables or table of Snowflake. There we go. So actually, one thing I found, so I'm not going to start building. I'm going to close it for now. We're going to move back to the master file. So we go to our focus and we can put that one into my personal folder. So there is my Snowflake sessions. So let's open that one up. And I already found that that link or that element that we saw, the sessions, was quite long. So I found that one to be truncated. So let's go in there, the client environment, and go to the properties in here. I found it's by default A200, which is kind of short. So let's change that to A500. Doing the same thing on the database itself. So change that one to A500, apply that one. So we're gonna save it. So now we changed our Snowflake sessions in here. So let's close that one. So now that we have Snowflake session in here, so we can now just start. So let's build a new visualization. I'm going to do something on Snowflake sessions now. I put it into my admin folder. So let's pick up my Snowflake sessions. Then we're going to go for a table. It's going to be easier to read. So let's go to the information that we have created on in here. So we're going to put that onto the columns. So actually, no, we wanted to put it onto the rows, not to the columns. So we're going to sort it descending. So we got the latest information on top. So we're going to add the username in here. So we got all the information. So remember, you're going to see my user in here popping up. So we're going to go for the authentication method. So we're going to see what's going on. And we can go for the client application version as well. And we can go for the, actually, we're going to go for the session. So let's get some information on the client environment. So there we go. Now we have a little bit more information in here. And so in here, we now see who's connecting in here. So I see here all the connection information coming from WebFOCUS. So I see what exactly was done in here. So it was connection done via a Java-based connection, of course. It's typical_WF for WebFOCUS. So it's the warehouse, it's the private key password, it's the private key file. It's again application typical_WF. It's the OS version and some more details in the connection to verify that we're really doing what we're expecting, which is as a key pair authentication versus whatever we run with the user Pahu6666. All those connections are run as a password authentication. PTMETS already runs on Key Pair. If you want to see, if you don't have a Key Pair, make sure to check out the Snowflake documentation, because there you're going to learn on how to create your key and how to assign your key and put your key into Snowflake. At the end, what WebFOCUS needs is nothing more than the key pair file, which is your private key file, and that's used to authenticate against Snowflake. And that's how you're going to configure Snowflake in WebFOCUS using two different security mechanisms, user and password or key pair. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know, leave a comment if you like it, and subscribe to the channel.